possible terrorist trio. 3 men are arrested and charged with conspiring to support ISIS terrorists.
Why is it that no one stop it? Enough!
Time to act. A group representing Christians in the Middle East calls for the U.S. to take action against persecution. Lenten timeout. As the Pope and his advisors make a retreat, the church encourages all of us to do the same. And meet Willie. A man who lived on the street near St. Peter's Square is now buried in the Vatican. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, February 26th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A Minneapolis teenager accused of trying to travel to Syria to join ISIS pleads guilty in federal court. Concern is growing tonight over the radicalization of people right here in the U.S. Chief White House correspondent Suzanne LaFranchi reports.
Brian, while the fight over funding for the Department of Homeland Security continues in Congress, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, testified before a Senate committee today, saying the Homeland is far from secure and the authorities are investigating terror plots in all 50 states.
The homegrown violent extremists continue to pose the most likely threat to the homeland.
Clapper told the Senate Armed Services Committee U.S. intelligence has identified 180 Americans who've tried to or have successfully traveled to fight in the region. In New York, 3 men from Brooklyn were arrested for allegedly plotting to join the Islamic State. According to court documents, one of the men tried to make contact with the terror group in an online chat, offering, quote, to shoot Obama and then get shot ourselves. Will it do? That will strike fear in the hearts of infidels.
This is real. This is the concern about the lone wolf inspired to act without ever going to the Middle East.
Meanwhile, the agency responsible for Homeland Security is caught in a political tug-of-war in Congress. Senate and House Republicans disagree over whether the bill should include a provision that rolls back President Obama's immigration measures.
Sometimes there are differences. You know, the House by nature and by design is a hell of a lot more rambunctious place than the Senate. Much more.
In another development on the terror front, the Washington Post and the BBC say they have discovered the identity of a man known as Jihad John. They say the terrorist who appears in ISIS beheading videos is Mohammed Emwazi. He was raised in London, and both British and American officials refuse to confirm that. From the White House, Suzanne LaFranchi, EWTN News Nightly.
Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Activists say as many as 220 Assyrian Christians have been abducted by Islamic State terrorists in the past 3 days. One group is urging Congress to do more to defend Christians in that region. Our Jason Calvi is here with that report.
Ryan, the fate of those hostages is the concern of Christians around the world tonight. We joined a group called In Demand of Action as they took their urgent plea to the Capitol today.
Enough now.
Journalist Nuri Kino is the founder of A Demand for Action, an international group speaking out for persecuted Christians in the Middle East.
We are devastated. We are frightened. We are horrified. But we're not surprised. We saw it coming.
Kino calls it a 10-year-old genocide. He says it started long before the kidnapping of hundreds of his fellow Assyrians this week and the beheadings of 21 Coptic Christians last week.
The first beheading video with an Assyrian was September 2004. That was sent to many of us. More than 100 Assyrian, Syriac, Chaldean churches have been attacked and bombed in Iraq. 75% of the Christians from Iraq has left the country. The same thing is now repeating in Syria.
And today the Islamic State released this video. Ancient artifacts in Iraq now are rubble. Kino's group is urging Congress to end ISIS's reign of terror, to save the Christians kidnapped by ISIS this week, and to quickly get funding to the region.
Because right now, we're looking at a situation where things are going from bad to worse to very soon might be catastrophic and mean the end of our existence in that land.
The Islamic State wants to impose a caliphate or an Islamic government. And Nuri Kino says that must not happen.
The world leaders must and should pay attention, because if they don't and the caliphate will enlarge, then we will have a world war. The world leaders must stop it now.
They brought that message to the only Assyrian member of Congress. We'll have more with her tomorrow. The Vatican says even though Pope Francis is on retreat right now, he's closely following the story and praying for those suffering. Brian?
Thank you, Jason Calvi. And Katherine Gorka is the president and co-founder of the Council on Global Security. Katie, you have contacts in northeast Syria. What are they saying about this mass abduction of Christians?
Yes, they're tremendously concerned. So the attack began about 4 o'clock on Monday morning. They had a very difficult time finding out exactly who was missing. They've been accumulating those names over the last few days. They do think it's as many as 300, possibly even 400 people. And of course, the concern is that there will be a massacre.
Give us a brief background of Assyrian Christians. They've been in this area for centuries.
Actually, they've been in, well, Assyrians, the Assyrian people, have been in this area for thousands of years. It's an ancient civilization. They converted to Christianity. They're thought to have converted to Christianity in 33. So they've been there for as long as there's been Christianity.
So if this continues, would you agree with people who say that a living history is disappearing?
Absolutely, yes. It's already a fairly small minority, and now they threaten to be wiped out.
Christian militias have joined with the Kurdish fighters there in fighting ISIS. How do you think the U.S. is responding to this escalating situation, and what else can be done?
Well, two specific things. One is the airstrikes. So 2 days ago, there was only one airstrike, and it was about probably 50 kilometers south of where these attacks are taking place. They only hit one ISIS vehicle. Yesterday, I think there were a couple of more airstrikes. So that's one important thing. The other is it's very important for the U.S. to be training and equipping these militia. So far, the Christian militia have not been included in U.S. efforts, and there needs to be pressure on them to include them.
So far, we've seen men slaughtered by these terrorists. We've heard that in this group of Assyrian Christians, there are elderly, there are women, there are children. What on earth is going to happen now?
Well, I mean, the fear, of course, is that the girls are going to be treated the same way the Yazidi girls have been treated, that they're going to be sold off as slaves to these ISIS men. You know, there are concerns. You know, I know that there are negotiations going on to have the women and children released. Certainly the expectation is that all the men will be killed, as they'll be thought to be fighters. But I think there are even concerns that the women and children may not be released.
Well, we'll continue to pray for all of them and for their freedom and for their safety. Katie Gorka, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
A Greek Orthodox seminary in Jerusalem is damaged by fire in what Israeli police suspect was a hate crime. Police say anti-Christian slogans were scribbled in Hebrew on the seminary's walls. That fire damaged the building's bathrooms, but no one was injured. This follows yesterday's attack on a West Bank mosque. Churches, mosques, and some Israeli groups have been targeted by vandals in recent years. These so-called price tag attacks are protests by Jewish extremists. They oppose the Israeli government's policies, which they perceive as pro-Palestinians. Lawmakers are sending the governor of West Virginia a bill that bans abortion after 20 weeks. Yesterday, senators approved the ban that the State House overwhelmingly passed earlier this month. Democratic Governor Earl Ray Tomblin vetoed a similar bill last year. He has promised to do the same with this bill. Some abortion exemptions for women in medical emergencies are included in this measure. The Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC, kicks off in Washington today. More than a dozen potential Republican presidential candidates hope to pick up support there. Speaking first, retired neurosurgeon Dr. Ben Carson outlined his alternative to Obamacare.
What I'm talking about is health savings account system. They work extremely well, available for everybody. We don't force people into them, but I tell you, when people see how these work, you won't have to force them into it.
Carson says he hopes Congress will listen carefully to his ideas before trying to undo the Affordable Care Act. A man known only as Willie, who lived on the streets near St. Peter's Square, is now buried in a Vatican cemetery. The pastor of St. Anna Parish in the Vatican says Willie attended morning mass every day. When he wasn't at Mass in early December, it was discovered he'd been taken to a hospital where he died a few days later. He is now buried in a Germanic cemetery in Vatican City, thanks to the generosity of a member of our EWTN family. Paul Bada arranged for Willie to be buried in the Vatican. Paul hosts 2 shows on EWTN's German channel. Joining us from Rome, and you're in the shadow of St. Anne's, where Willie attended Mass on a daily basis. Did you actually know him?
Yes, he was a friend of mine. He was a neighbor, but a neighbor on the street. So I met him every day on the street. On my way to St. Anne, on my way to work, on my way back, met him there every morning, every evening.
So how and why were you able to arrange to have him buried right there in the Vatican?
Because every morning I saw him in the church, or every time I've been there, and then all of a sudden he had disappeared. I realized he'd gone sick, but we had been in contact until, let's say, 3 or 4 days before his death, and then he disappeared. Then I asked somebody what's happening to Willie, and they told me he's gone. And they said, how come, and where, and then, etc. Then I looked in Santo Spirito, where he died. I got there, asked, what are you going to do with Willie? He said, we bring him out of Rome. He said, no, hold a minute. We want to have him here. I want to have him here in Campo Santo Teutonico, to get him buried there. Because he loved it so much to be in Rome. He's been a pilgrim here for many, many years. He loved St. Peter. I thought it's right to have him here for the rest of, not of his time, of his existence.
He's buried with aristocrats there in this German background cemetery. How appropriate is that? I heard that he never asked for anything, that he was always talking to young people about spirituality and the Pope and Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, he never asked for anything. He was a beggar, but never begged. He's been just waiting there, and he got his share. I mean, yeah, he was of a great serenity, and never met him angry or whatever. I never met him drunk. He was not a drinker, what's usually happening to those on the street. He was a gentleman. He was a heavenly man. He was a saintly man. And then, so I just thought he had to be buried here.
Give us a glimpse of the rich history of this cemetery where Willie's now buried.
This is a cemetery. It's the most prominent cemetery in Rome. It is, since the year of 800, has been given by Emperor Charles, by the Pope to the Emperor Charles to the Germans. So from that time on, it's the German cemetery. Now it's the only cemetery working here in Rome. There's no other place we can be buried, but nobody's going to be buried there except those of the Arch Fraternity. And as it happened, 4 days before Willie's death, at the 8th of December, I became a member of the Arch Fraternity, and I thought it's a good idea to have him here before I get there, to have Willie here.
What a beautiful gesture. Paul Bada, we appreciate your good work for EWTN. Thanks for joining us tonight from Rome.
Most welcome. Bye, Brian.
Coming up, the South gets hit with another major snowstorm as the deep freeze shows no sign of a spring thaw. And a Detroit area couple receives a rare triple blessing, naturally conceived identical triplets. There is no sin that God cannot pardon. All we need to do is ask for forgiveness. That's a tweet Pope Francis sent out this weekend before leaving on retreat. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. The U.S. National Security Advisor and the UN Ambassador will address America's leading pro-Israel lobby this weekend. It's an attempt to ease soaring tensions with Israel over a potential Iran nuclear deal. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address a joint session of Congress next week here in Washington, arguing against any such deal. President Obama will not meet Netanyahu during his trip to D.C. The director of U.S. National Intelligence warns of expanding cyber threats.
Well, I can't go into detail here. The Russian cyber threat is more severe than we had previously assessed.
In a written assessment, Director James Clapper says Russia is establishing its own cyber command for offensive activities. U.S. intelligence agencies list cyber attacks as the top danger to U.S. national security ahead of terrorism. Clapper says Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea pose the most serious cyber threats to America. Internet service providers must now comply with strict new federal regulations. The Federal Communications Commission voted today to begin enforcing what's called net neutrality. That means providers can't block or slow web traffic and create paid fast lanes on the internet. Opposition to the regulation, including much of industry, says it constitutes dangerous government overreach. The southern U.S. takes a pounding from yet another snowstorm. Katherine Zeltner reports on the deep freeze that just won't let go.
A fierce blast of winter weather is bringing the South to a grinding halt. Snow began falling in much of Alabama yesterday. Parts of the state got more than 10 inches today, breaking records that date back to the 1890s. Tennessee is also getting new snow as it recovers from last week's huge ice storm. The state's governor is urging people to check on their neighbors after that storm left at least 30 people dead. North Carolina is also getting hit with snow, sleet, and freezing rain. The weather interrupted schools, government, and other operations.
I wish that I was better prepared.
The storm moved north today. Washington, D.C. had more than 200 trucks ready to keep the roads open. Katherine Saltner, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thanks, Katherine. A suburban Detroit couple adjusts to the blessing of naturally conceived identical triplets, something quite rare, we're told. Alexander, Nicholas, and Timothy Whiteley are just a month old. Aren't they cute? The Whiteleys have 2 other young children, so a family of 5 now, or 5 children. Mom says it was the shock of a lifetime when an ultrasound revealed 3 babies.
It was the ultrasound tech that kind of left the room, came back, and I thought something was wrong. And then she said, no, it's good news, it's good news. I said, oh my gosh, it's twins, isn't it? She said, no, I see 3. This is the shock of a lifetime.
The Whiteleys say they go through a ton of diapers, but they're making it work. Up next, grounded in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, Pope Francis enters the final day of a week-long retreat. And students attending this historic Catholic school in our nation's capital celebrate Black History Month. Today, the 26th of February, is the memorial of St. Alexander of Alexandria. This champion of Orthodox Catholic teaching fought vigorously against the Arian heresy. It's also assumed that Alexander drew up the acts of the First General Council of Nicaea in 325. That's where the Nicene Creed comes from. We thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick with the EWTN News Nightly team. Well, as the first full week of Lent draws to a close, Pope Francis and his advisors are immersed in spiritual exercises outside of Rome. They've been on retreat all week in the Roman suburb of Aricia. The Vatican's newspaper reports the retreat master is calling the participants to authentic worship. Jesuit Father Joseph Carolla, a professor of theology at the Pontifical Gregorian University, is joining us from Rome. Father, Pope Francis and the Roman Curia will wrap up their Lenten retreat tomorrow. As a Jesuit formed in the spiritual exercises, the Ignatian spirituality, how might the Holy Father be spending this time?
Well, every year, Jesuits are obliged to spend 8 days making their annual retreat, doing usually the spiritual exercises. And during this retreat, the Holy Father has a preacher, a Carmelite friar, who will be giving conferences twice a day. So the Holy Father will be taking the material from the conferences and then using that for his private meditations. In addition to that, there'll be moments for the Divine Office, no doubt for the Rosary, and certainly for the celebration of the Eucharist with the others present from the Roman Curia.
Before leaving on retreat, the Holy Father said spiritual conversion and growth starts from the heart. It's there that the match of daily choices between good and evil, worldliness and the gospel, indifference and sharing gets played. Can you talk a little bit about the discernment of spirits that underlies the spiritual exercises and how that quote might tie into that?
Yeah, well, the discernment of spirits are really at the heart of the matter. St. Ignatius, at the time of his first conversion, was moved one way or another by good spirits and bad spirits as he was convalescing in the castle of Loyola. And he began to understand these movements in a brand new way. And he noticed that some of the movements would give him consolation and others would leave him very dry. This experience eventually led to his writing of the spiritual exercises and his famous rules for discernment. There's 2 sets of them. And it's really about the movements of the heart, but how God himself is moving our heart, or how the bad spirit is moving our heart, or possibly just how we're moving our own hearts. So it could be a good spirit, a bad spirit, or just at a natural level coming from ourselves. And so the whole movement is to take time to look deeply within our own hearts, to experience these spiritual movements, and to be able to discern clearly, to see clearly how the Lord is calling us through consolations, through desolations. And so when the Holy Father talks about it all begins really in the heart, and this is where the choices of good and bad are being played out, it's a matter of purifying the heart and seeing more clearly so we make the right choices and good choices motivated by the good spirit, not choices motivated by a bad spirit who can be very subtle. The Holy Father's often spoken about the angel of light, the evil one who presents himself as a good spirit, but it has to be tested, and we have to delve more deeply into these movements to make sure that, yes, this indeed comes from God, and then with that conviction, with the consolation that comes, to move ahead boldly in choosing the good.
A very good insight as to how our Jesuit Holy Father would be making his Lenten retreat based on the Ignatian spirituality and the spiritual exercises. Father Joseph Carolla, thank you for joining us from Rome tonight.
Thank you, Brian. Good to be with you.
An early leader in the pro-life movement, Dr. Charles Rice, has passed away. Dr. Rice was an international speaker and renowned author, an expert in constitutional law. He worked diligently for human life amendment to the U.S. Constitution. He died yesterday, surrounded by his large family. Dr. Rice was 83. Well, throughout this month of February, Americans observe Black History Month. As Wyatt Goolsby reports tonight, Catholic students here in the nation's capital are preparing for a very special celebration.
In northwest Washington, D.C., near the corner of 15th and V Streets, you may be able to make out the sounds of traditional African music. Today, students inside St. Augustine's Catholic School have been hard at work to get everything ready for tomorrow's all-school program. The show was the culmination of the school's celebration of Black History Month.
The theme is Precious Memories, and it is a grandfather who is telling her children or her daughters the stories of the past.
Sister Gloria, the school's principal, says this month students have been highlighting famous African Americans. St. Augustine has historically been linked to African American heritage. The school is even located a few blocks away from the African American Civil War Memorial. The parish traces its history all the way back to 1858, when emancipated Black Catholics wanted a place to educate their children. And it's not just sports figures or civil rights leaders on the wall. Students have also written reports on Black Catholic saints.
We can applaud our ancestors or we can imitate them, but only one of those two will honor them. And we realize that imitating them will honor them.
Father Patrick Smith, the church's pastor, says the school aims to keep Christ at its center, which is why you'll find references to Lenten prayers right next to historical figures. Sister Gloria says St. Augustine's reflects the diversity of the Catholic Church and its wider mission.
Serving the people, the church, the community, and the neighborhood where we live, it's a history to write.
And it's a legacy this school is passing down from generation to generation. In Washington, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. A beautiful story. And thank you for watching EWTN News Nightly. Until tomorrow, we hope you'll connect with us. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. If you'd like to watch again, you can always go to EWTN's YouTube page. I encourage you to download the EWTN app to your smartphone or other handheld device. It's the easiest way to watch EWTN News Nightly and the rest of EWTN's quality Catholic programming. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night, and may God bless you.